also a strong desire that we're hearing more and more from of people who don't want development, and that relates to the Route 17 too. There's people complaining Route 17 is already built out. We don't need any more cars on there. 49% of our land is in land use for ag or forestry, meaning it's not supposed to be used for development. So when you get down to what's left and you're taking out, residential and all that, it's a limited thing. Also in our business climate is we're an aging community. Who we attract, the workforce and things like that, we are older than other communities, but our whole region is too. And the state is older than the nation still, I believe. So what's happened to us with all of this? Well, we are retail dependent. The good thing is that we have attracted more retail that's helped our sales tax, which has helped us keep going and has helped to keep taxes, real estate taxes down, and we've become a hub for the Middle Peninsula. We have a heavy reliance on real estate taxes. And everybody's, I don't want my taxes raised. I don't want my taxes raised, but we have issues because we cannot afford to handle some of our keeping up with our infrastructure. We have a very difficult budget process. We postpone maintenance and things. When there's been a lot of discussion about the fire and rescue and the borrowing that's going to have to be done for that. There are many things that we have to borrow money for. That's a big one you would normally borrow for, but there's many things we borrow money for because there's not enough cash in the bank to do it, and therefore we're paying interest, unfortunately, and not just paying cash out for it. Things like, school buses or HVAC and things, heat and air conditioning that we've had to borrow for in the past and will be also in the future. But when you think about fire and rescue, we're saving about $10 million in tax money by having volunteer organizations. We know what's happening with volunteer organizations, and we hope they're going to keep on going, but then we don't have the funds for those. So economic development is a pretty important thing, is how are we going to keep our county thriving without going over the top in some ways that no one wants to see. We also have low-wage jobs because most of our jobs are in the retail and the service industry. The highest paying jobs in the county are with the hospital and with the county. Where across the river, the highest paying jobs are with corporations and with high-end manufacturing. So we have this huge group of people. We're a veteran community because people know they can get more money over here and they drive back and forth to work. And now we have the tolls coming off. That's another factor. And we have increased interest in housing development, quite a bit of that. So what are the potential benefits of a data center? This isn't truly a typical benefit, but what Gloucester County has an advantage over, in some of the areas that you'll see slides on, is that this area where our power line is not right in the middle of a subdivision. So we have more of a rural area around where that power line is. Another benefit, or a benefit of a data center, is they have lower traffic often than neighborhoods or other types of economic development. Businesses and things. They have usually about 20 to 40 people who work in them. That's it. So you only got 20 to 40 people coming, and that's 24 hours a day, so it's not all 20 or 40 leaving at once. There's a number of deliveries that are done, so people will talk about delivery trucks, but that could be anywhere. Think about how many times we see landfill trucks and going up and down the road. I lost it. My notes. Higher traffic during construction. That is, don't want to ignore that during construction, a lot more traffic comes along. So the higher paying jobs, they pay more than other industries. Some of the positions are security. Joe mentioned that these things are top security. Some of them are very much so, and they have higher trained people. When we were in, I was feel like I was on a TV show with the guys that were around there. They all looked like they were ex-military and they were quite scary. There's also the IT type jobs. We have that in our area for a workforce. If we were trying to attract a data center between the ex-military and the others around here, we'd have no problem filling that many jobs. If we had a factory come to town and we needed 1,000 workers, we'd have trouble. We'd have a very low unemployment rate. The technology changes have been improving, and we'll talk about that for the cooling option. So that's sort of more of an advantage that's happening now. And the potential for significant equipment taxes and additional land taxes and impact of the construction and what that does for the economy is why people are so interested. And I'll be showing you some examples of that. And again, this is something where a property owner may actually make money, because the way that the properties are in this area are zoned right now, it would require rezoning to be able to make it a more profitable piece of property. But if an overlay district was there and it was allowed, somebody's property just went up in value if they did want to sell. How about those disadvantages? Quite a few of those too, and we're going to talk more in depth about them. Increased utility lines, not only at the facility, but going on out. The aesthetics and the cost it's paid by all customers. I think that we'll see a lot going on legislatively about this, because it's like we all kind of woke up when a business wants to develop and they need electricity. They work with Dominion and they say, okay, how much are you going to do? And it's a trade-off, and they look at the revenue sharing and all that stuff, and they get the price for bringing electricity in. They have those equations. That's not the way that transmission lines work. Transmission lines are paid by all of us. So all of us who are on Dominion have paid for every one of those data centers in Northern Virginia. Yet, did we or did we not get the benefit?
That's the benefit.
And so that expense is a very negative thing for everybody, whether we do one or not. That'll still be there. One of the most annoying and concerning things environmentally is the use of large amounts of drinking water. I remember reading a story years and years ago about sort of like a science fiction about the end of the world, and it was going to be caused over fighting for water, because drinking water is the most primary thing that we have to have, right? We can ask Richmond about that. Technology has changed. The industry is not blind or deaf to hearing the complaints, and they want to improve. So they have done some changing. And as Joe mentioned, we can set ordinances that say whatever we need them to say. And so there are waterless, which again, we'll talk about and show you a picture one. There are waterless data centers. We would have to have a waterless data center if one comes to Gloucester County. Noise and traffic to nearby residents. And we'll discuss more about this again in the decibels and things. The aesthetics of developing land, like the large box that we're talking about, and even with landscaping, some people just can't stand them. The tax revenue, if everybody says, look, we're going to make millions, and then it doesn't happen, because either the business closes and it's like a factory goes down. We've seen how that does with mills and things, and how communities suffer when Franklin's plant went down, the paper mill. I mean, it affects the community. So it could happen. It also could happen that they buy the land and never do it because they got other deals. That's not so much to them, right? They could hold on to it and maybe never build it. We might think it's coming and it doesn't. So you can't count your chicken before they hatch. And then the potential loss of agricultural and forest land, which of course the habitat and the animals and all the different species. And then looking at the amount of impervious surface that would go into the area for that, and maybe even lighting is a concern as far as night sky around the area. Here's a map that's probably outdated already, and just showing so many different data centers. If you Google it, you'll see that there's over 400 because of the way they count buildings, and there's 70 that are being built now. They're referenced, so you'll see 300, 400. 35% of all known of the hyperscale types of data centers worldwide are in Virginia. Loudoun has the most centers with 150 of them, and approximately 70% of all internet activity worldwide goes through Ashburn. Remember how when you go to load a video and they make you watch an ad? That's what they were talking about, that delay. It is very different now, and there's more marketing to it. But it used to be, it was waiting so that your data could get to your phone. And that's what they did. They had you watch an ad while they're getting and pulling, because you don't know where it's all coming from. We have companies in Virginia that everybody knows: Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, Meta, or Facebook. Others, one I'm going to talk about with Hanover is Pixel. So there's just lots of them. The governor really wanted data centers, big economic drivers. So they gave a huge grant out, Google, another one of ours. And there's still the sales tax that was mentioned too. That hurts if you don't get that sales tax you're getting. There's a lot of people, they've got charts that show how much sales tax has been lost by this advantage they get. So now we're going to get into kind of the numbering of concerns. So first of all, location, location, location. You know, that's what sells. Concerns are, we don't want them near homes. We don't want them near schools. We don't want them near neighborhoods. They might lower the value of the homes. They change the appearance of the community. And they're, you know, potentially inconsistent in our case with the comp plan, which can be updated. But right now they would be inconsistent because of the Dragon Runs watershed management plan. I'm not sure if there really is an inconsistency, but as far as just not development. The responses to how this is being handled: zoning restrictions. Localities are changing what's called by right. Like if I own this land, I can put a data center on it. That's my right. It doesn't have to be zoned a specific way. Many of the localities had by right, and because neighbors, they could come and protest and do whatever they wanted, but there was no stopping it because it was by right. Many of the localities have switched to what you call a CUP, a conditional use permit. And so they're changing. Like Henrico's one of the ones that's saying, whoa, wait a minute. We let the cat out of the bag. Too much is happening. Another specific thing that might be a concern for us is a height restriction. Data centers are tall, and 45 feet. What does that seem like? Is that okay? We can go that far, but some data centers want to be 75. So it might be that an ordinance change would limit the height, the buffer areas, and how much is there, and requiring landscaping. So here's some pictures. We're going to flip through it. You can see the neighbors and the data center. I don't know about y'all, but I don't want to live there. That's crazy. Crazy. This is Northern Virginia. So this is where we went. This is in Henrico County. It's on a 4-lane highway, kind of similar to 33. You think about going up King William, going out of West Point, keeping up going to 64. This looks more like what 33 is starting to look like, right? For those people who don't really understand what a data center is like inside, that bottom picture shows you have different ones. Like Google may own the whole thing, but in the QTS, it's a tenant-based data center. So they are selling spaces they can have tens of thousands of people. Like somebody might just need a little space, somebody might need a whole room. So they have cages and they're all secured and they accommodate them. It's almost like a concierge service. The one we saw had this phenomenal elevator, like probably one of the only ones in Henrico that can handle that kind of weight for moving those things. This is the entrance, just to kind of show and what it's like. And that you can still see it, but it's, it's kind of like going into Cannon. If you go drive down 17, it's not that bad. And, depending, that was also, you didn't have a lot of foliage up at that point. So here's a comparison just to kind of give you a reference point. This is RCC, where we are right now. If you look at the edge of the road, which is too far away for a data center, it would need to be on the other side of 33. It would be on the bottom side. But that's a 300-foot buffer. Most people, you can drive by RCC and not even know it's there, right? You don't know it's a big box back here. It's just, that's the way it is. We have a historic district in this area that has to be protected. We would no way in the world want to do anything that would influence this. And I believe it's 195 acres. So it's a large one. We have industry right here, not just the solar, but most people might even realize that's there. That's right off of 33. The buffer on it is about 400 feet to the start of the kind of area that's been cleared, and it's about almost 900 feet to the building. And you, again, do you know it? You know, it's there, it's happening. Noise. So not just location. Now we're going to move on to noise. Two main issues: loud noise and humming. I mouthed to Ron Persick, one of my buddies. I said, "You're in here." That's because I'm going to talk about the humming noise. So the loud noises are most often caused by the generators, which are only run when there's no power, or they're doing the testing, or they're by their cooling systems, the chillers, the cooling towers, and the heat and air conditioning. The humming noise that is low level is like a constant, because again, this place is open 24 hours a day. And so there can be a continuous humming. First thing I did when we got out of the van at this QTS is I got out my phone and I'm waiting to hear the buzz, right? I'm waiting to hear it. There was no buzz. There is no sound outside of that center. I took a video and I was like, all I hear are the birds chirping. So it's how it's built, how it's cooled, all those kind of things factor in. They don't get away without having the noise from the generator. That's still an issue. And when we went inside, the first part, very, like I said, very accommodating. But it did get loud when you got up to the, actually where the servers were. Not so much that we had to wear earplugs or anything, but you could hear the noise there. QTS, just for reference, you can see some pictures in a second. They have 11 what they call belly generators, and that are right by the building, and then they have 9 elsewhere in all those fuel tanks above ground. So not the prettiest thing. Not pretty, is it? But it has to run 24 hours a day, and they have to have enough power to keep it running if the power goes out. So here's where we get to the decibels. The underlying part is for 50 decibels. And as it says, it's a moderate rainfall or like a refrigerator. Most of the videos that I watched where people were going and complaining about noise levels, and citizens who were, taping and showing and stuff, they had their meters and they were showing that the humming noise was right around 50. If you look at like Louisa, they put their county ordinance in at 60 for nighttime, 65, because you think about a refrigerator running, gosh, that's not so bad. But I can tell you that we have had concerns that have been raised about the Cannon facility, and they were able to do some things to help, but it's not perfect. It really depends upon what the foliage is like, and in our case with Cannon, and which way the wind is blowing. So it's definitely not a perfect situation. So how are people handling the noise? First of all, they are changing the way that the cooling goes on, because again, that is very noisy with the coolers and the chillers and stuff. The corporate response, they're trying to reduce some natural gas would be really cost prohibitive, but at the same time, if it's a small data center, they might be able to do that. They're promising, we'll do pre-test, we'll do post-test. They're putting that as part of their ordinances. Gloucester County, in their proposed site right now, they're committed to limiting the generator testing to weekdays 8 to 7 and conducting sound studies within 6 months, and et cetera, et cetera. It's not going to make a lot of people happy because it's still going to have the noise. There are movements trying to help the situation. There is technology where they're trying to not be a bad neighbor, and they're looking and experimenting with different kinds of sound protection systems. The generators have to be tested once a month for 15 minutes and twice a year for 2 hours. So they're going to run for 2 hours during those time frames. Number 3, water usage. Depending upon how large it is, you could see scary numbers, especially in the past, of up to 2 to 5 million gallons per day. And again, that's running those cooling towers, and it cools and it goes through, and I'm going to skip all the definitions and just kind of get to what are the responses. Well, first of all, places like Louisa had plenty of water, and water costs like the whole infrastructure to make public water for the community. If you don't have enough customers, It's tough. So here was a new customer that's gonna buy 620,000 gallons of raw water a day. That was income to help them keep their infrastructure going, as well as maybe build it out to other areas where they want to. That's not us. There's less water systems that are hybrids. They are now using, the average is 300,000 gallons a day. Some go up to 600. There's exploration of other water sources, everything from seawater to wastewater. But the thing that is what we would have to be interested in is the waterless data center. We don't have, we're doing about 1.5 million gallons of water a day at the reservoir. We have more water, we go to up to 4 million gallons a day. We're not about to spend 600,000 or 1 million or whatever for a data center, nor would we be able to pipe it all the way here, nor would we pipe from the Dragon Run. It's just, we might limit the opportunities for Gloucester, but at some point you say, well, then if the shoe doesn't fit, you don't wear it, right? And if it's gonna happen, it needs to be a waterless type data center. Here's one right here, it was built in Atlanta. They're claiming that they're saving 663 million plus gallons of water per year. And they are 169 megawatt capacity. They're edged data center. Which is 400,000 square feet. Another picture of it, they have 3 facilities. They have 1 substation. If you have under 300 megawatts, you can get away with 1 substation. But when you go bigger than that, you got to have 2. So it's twice as ugly and twice as many generators. This is just a reference of, it's a mile. I tried to, like, as the crow flies, how close is the Dragon? 1.64 miles. Nobody's ever going to, that I can think of, ever endorse taking from the Dragon. And I know a lot of people are concerned about that, but it's cost prohibitive, and it's just not going to be a concern. Like I said, if the shoe fits, you don't wear it. An example of how we change ordinances and we limit things is what the board did with solar, right? We started with solar, and this is why it's so important to have this meeting now, because it's early. Solar, we sort of weren't ready for it, and it was changing quickly. So the board had an ordinance, and then they went back and changed it based on public input, and they limited how much solar can be built in Gloucester County. All right, excessive energy use. We've heard about how much power these take. Virginia has been trying to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels. That's not going to happen unless some other changes happen. I don't think the windmills are going to do enough for them. So if Virginia keeps things as they are going to have to keep up the existing gas-fueled power plant online and add at least 1 more large plant every 2 years for the next 15 years, according to the state's independent audit commission that was released in May. Blackouts, brownouts. Everybody's concerned, I don't want to lose power at my house because of some data center, right? And it's happened, just happened recently in Spain. The Dominion's plan admits to these potential shortages. They know they've got a problem with it. And in February of 2025, so very recently, Dominion revealed that it had signed contracts for 19 more gigawatts. So that's 100. No, it's a 19 times, it's 100 megawatt, I'm sorry. 1,000 megawatts makes the gigawatt. So I really messed that one up. Anyway, but those are going to be in Loudoun and Prince William County, and that's going to nearly double their previous contracts. And they said a gigawatt, Dominion said a gigawatt would provide power for roughly 250,000 homes. Okay. The cost to consumers going up, and I just noticed my slide didn't get changed, but anyway, the cost to consumers may double. We've already seen the rates that have been going up, but on the responses, there is an inherent financial incentive to reduce energy consumption. When we went to QTS, we asked them, what do you pay? They pay 1 million a month in electrical bills. Anybody who's running a business doesn't want to pay $1.5 million for electrical bills. If they can become more efficient, they have every kind of incentive to change technology on that. The requirements that some people put in, oh, you got to have a solar site next to this, and we'll accept a data center. That's really a feel-good thing. The amount of solar panels that would be needed to run a data center, the only one that seems to really be doing it, there's one of the largest solar, I think it's the largest solar facility in the world or in the country. It's in Texas. You can look it up, and they have enough to run their data center. But most of the time, it's just, you reduce the power a little bit, but it's not going to help it. It doesn't relieve the being able to run the generators and things like that. One other note, though, is when we improve these power lines and they're doing all this stuff to a community, it might help us if we lose our power, because now we have another source. This is that same edge, just real quick. There's a standard they're trying to improve. I'm going to try to speed it up. This is about the different megawatts that are used. One thing that I wanted to mention, some of the inside information we got from Dominion is there's like a form you fill out when you're interested in having one, and they'll work with you and go through and evaluate. So 20-acre minimum, not so much, just 20-acre minimum. If you want 2 buildings, 50-acre minimum. Transmission lines, these big lines, and they have to have redundancy. So you have to have, if you have 100 megawatt big facility, you've got to have, besides your generators, you've got to have power coming 2 different ways. If you go to 300 and over, you got to have it 3 ways. So that's why you see so much crossover in all these different lines. They're unattractive. Of course, I've already mentioned everybody's paying for them. This thing about the law, again, we may not have understood that Dominion is making all of us pay. Not they are, but we are paying for it. The other part is Dominion, as the electrical provider, if somebody comes and says, I want to build a data center, by law, they have to provide it. They don't get to say, no can do. They have to figure it out. Now, when they can add into their own right of way, they don't come to us and say, Gloucester County, and I'll show you our right of way in a minute. They can do whatever they want in that right of way that's for them. We don't get to stop it. Our local board cannot stop it. The only where that changes is if a new right of way is needed, which is usually 100 to 150 feet. Then it's got to go to the SEC, and then you can go protest to the state and say, don't let them expand. And that's the only chance that you have. So some of you all may know this Piedmont Environmental Council. They're a very active group in Northern Virginia. This guy's standing up protesting when he's saying now it's all full and they need to go to a bigger new area. And the concern is that it's going to affect the Manassas National Battlefield Park. Just more showing, what they look like. So when I wanted to see what the impact was sort of more regionally to the QTS site. So you can see in the top left there, that's where the substation is. The 2 round are the water tanks that supply the water for their facility. And you can see the substation also down at the bottom in the large right of way. So I followed it on the aerial, and then I went down into street view to see what does it look like. This is, the larger line cutting through the woods. It's not so horrible. Not that people want it in front of where it's, not in the woods, but not absolutely horrible, but a lot of people would never want that on their property. This was at the end of a cul-de-sac. They started painting the poles brown to try to make them blend in more. This is ours. So this is less than a half a mile south from the intersection of 17 and 33. We have a 230 line on one side and a 130 on the other. And I think it's 230, it's 250, I just forgot. It's 500 is the big one, the huge ones that again are by the highways. So we're going to see change. All of, whether we do a data center or not, we're going to see change. We're going to see bigger lines. Because Dominion is replacing all of their smaller transmission lines. I'm not talking about distribution lines to your house. but they are going through and they are replacing them.
Okay.
And it is a 230 and a 130. We are, some of the information they won't tell you is like, when are we up, right? Because they got a list, but all they could tell us is you're not in the next couple of years. But everything, all the 130s are going away. So we will see bigger, these poles will be taken down, bigger poles will be going in. When you go to Dominion and somebody goes to Dominion, it could be a landowner, could be one of y'all in the room and tries to work Dominion, or it could be the developer, whatever. They like to have 200 megawatts of available power. They will go with nothing if they know they have 50 within 18 to 24 months, because they said it takes 48 to 60 months to build a substation. So if they know power's coming in, they can do these things if it's guaranteed. But when we ask them, well, how much are we using right now? Like what capacity? So if you got a 230, are we using 200 of it or are we using 25? They won't tell you. That's part of their thing. And it also does change. It's obviously variable. But from day one, their preference, if they're filling out a form, is they want to have 50 extra megawatts of capacity. Pollution concerns, real quick. People are concerned about the emissions from the diesel generators. I think for speed time, I'm just going to skip this. The JLARC study addresses it and says it's not an issue. Northern Virginia's got things where it's not an issue. We're probably doing much worse with our cars driving down the road than ever could come out of those generators. Traffic concerns is also not an issue here, because I went through and I pulled the capacity of what we are right now, Route 17 and Route 33 in this area. We're not even anywhere near what the capacity is for the roads. There are many local incentives that, again, I'm not going to go through it, but just saying they're there to attract data centers. They want them. They'll do these things. And then let's talk about revenue. So we already talked about the loss of sales tax. Just kind of understanding, it's a big one. Data centers generating 38% of the county's general fund. And that in Loudoun County, they have been able to reduce their tax rate and saving the average homeowner, because the taxes up there are crazy, $3,000 annually. And they have the lowest tax rate of all their neighbors by 25% because of those data centers. Prince William County, look how they've grown, 4,237% since 2012. City of Manassas just had the opposite thing. They just got burned. In that data center, which is a tenant-based, they allowed a bank to come in. Banks are exempt from the personal property of business tax. So they weren't getting the money for that space that they thought they were going to get. Here's some examples of what kind of money we're talking about. And Charles City County, been in the news a lot, they're estimating $258 million over the next 20 years from the data center that they're doing right now. And I believe it's going to happen. Pennsylvania, 100 million annually. Louisa, 25 million annually. The average is 2.5 million a year for a 10 megawatt facility. Okay. So the smallest one would generate about $2.5 million in taxes. People say, well, they're not going to last. Everything has a lifespan. That's true. They're looking at 15 to 20 years of that peak economic time. You get hooked on that money and it's there, and then what happens when it's not there, right? But they're looking at the lifespan of the facility. And of course, it can go further if the technology is still updated and all. Are we on the list? How high up are we? Don't have the public water. We're not going to allow, the wells. It's not going to be done. The state of Virginia is not going to allow that. And I don't think our board would allow it too, because we don't want to see our wells hurt. A lot of people complain about West Point and the cone of depression there. So it may require multiple landowners. It'd be great if there was one site and they could just come right in and it had water and it had, we don't have that. The size of the transmission lines, King and Queen has two 230s. We only have the one 230. They're already in a better position than we are. And that's not on this line, but it's on another one. And then the potential access to 17 and 33 to have two different highways potentially. That's a really big plus if it's possible. And then easy access to it. This is again looking at neighbors. It's not just about what we do, it's about what others do. And this was a good quote. Again, people can read it. If they download, where one of the board members from Warren County was like, and she explained how they were going to substitute and make up for, and that, because you can't just say, well, we don't want that, but we don't know how we're going to survive. And this is my slides that kind of got out of order, but saying in summary, it's a reality. We could have a landowner approach today. And so I'm so glad that we're having this meeting. Pros and cons is always the pros and cons. There's definitely going to be people who are on different sides, and that you can't avoid that. So these are just for the last couple of weeks. This is Chesapeake. The Planning Commission, after a 4-hour disgruntled citizen meeting, voted it down, but it still goes to the Board of Supervisors. City Council. So you can see who's probably complaining. The neighbors right there. This is Henrico, and the ones that they're looking at changing their by right. This is the Charles City County one. And I think, like I said, that one's going to make it. I wanted to get one. And this is the Gigaland that Fauquier County is looking at. And just to give you an idea of the proffers. So I'm not talking about the taxes. What they say they'll do is right up front. $2.2 million ladder truck, 50 cents a square foot of the data center towards parks and recreation for heritage resources or recreational improvements. 50 cents a square foot of data center towards the town they have within their county, Remington. $500,000 donation to the Meadows HOA, which must be the nearest neighborhood. And the phase 1 archaeological studies and a traffic impact study. That's in addition to the millions that they are looking at doing. Whew, y'all stayed with me, and I'm sorry. I know that was a long time. Preacher's not supposed to go for 20 minutes, and I went a lot longer than that. We should have the microphone system available and all. We want to have good conversation. So would anybody like to start? It can be comments or it can be questions. Yes, sir.
So we had a lot of promises with the dump that was built some years ago. My wife's people living here forever. Really revolutionary war time. To see something like that happen at this end of the county, close to the home sites, like that. There was promises of no smell. Yeah. I heard of people that went to these other dumps and they didn't have any smell there, and everybody was nice, and all the neighbors around the place said it was okay. Much like your visitation, possibly to this Henrico or Hanover site, there could have been things done to make sure that your visit was well received by you. Such as these people told me that a lot of the neighbors didn't object to the dump that they were visiting. Well, come to find out, much like our dump, they bought local property around it, and people living in some of those houses that Gloucester residents used to live at many years ago. Mm-hmm. What are these things about no noise that, like you've heard, but everything I read talks about noise? That could it possibly be like also read where they like turn down the fans and stuff for visitation by people like yourself? I have a noise coming from the dump, and I can't get that resolved right now.
I know who you are.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
And they're trying
to. Yes, I tried to work with them, and it doesn't seem like we're getting anywhere because I had promises made. Nobody's getting back with me. Nobody's showing me where to go. So the same thing with the data centers. Everything if you go online and read with the noise, it's the same type of situation. And a lot of people complain about the noise, and you say waterless. Does that go to fans, and then when fans are on, that's where a lot of noise comes.
I'm going to repeat, just summarize really quick to make sure everybody can hear, because we don't have mics out in the audience. The concern is sort of promises that were done with the landfill and what the results have been for the people who live up here versus promises for maybe this wonderful data center that will end up not being that. And I think with everything, there's risk. One thing that I will say on, this is not, if I lived up here, and I did look at a house up here right across the street at one point, and I was like, no, I don't want to live across the landfill. So I can personally relate to it. But I want to make sure that the community does know that we have had tremendous benefit financially from that landfill. Not maybe the people living here who had to deal with it, but countywide we have. And there's been some misunderstandings about that. And the Board of Supervisors recently asked for this fall to have a special presentation on it. I think we need to get that information. It's just like today. You need to hear the facts before thinking we got ripped off. But I can tell you this much for right now as a hint, you'd be paying a whole lot more tax money if we didn't have that landfill agreement.
Well, thank you for having these meetings, and it was better than what was happening at the dump when it was built and all the public meetings we had. And I think there was a lot of public input, and I would say to the negative side of it, yet the Board of Supervisors
moved ahead.
Yeah,
I was talking about it tonight, and I said, I
hope
hope I don't get milk thrown on me like Walter Jackson did. So I do. I've been here 38 years. I remember that. I remember many complaints and concerns, and I also know that every. Well, there's an amnesty on how long ago that was. But I do know that every member of the Board of Supervisors who voted for that, wasn't serving later on. So that doesn't make you feel better if you're living with something, even if somebody voted a way that differently. So I think before I go to the next comment, just say the more homework you do, the more restrictions they have would be the way to, whether it's bonding or I don't know, to verify that they can do what they say they're going to do. And if they don't, they got to pay. So there may be, it may not, and again, there's always going to be pros and cons. People who don't live near are going to be like, yeah, great, my taxes went down. Thank you, Glenn's. So that's the reality of it. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I would like to know why there wasn't any public hearings before this solar farm went in. We didn't get a choice at it. It just appeared.
I believe there were hearings, but okay, so there was a by right. There's different ones too. So if the property was zoned that way, that's why it's important to have this meeting right now. Rest assured, if you're totally not wanting anything to do with a data center up here, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to have that happen without a whole lot of changes. So in that case, if the property was already zoned where it could happen, then the citizens don't have to be asked. Remember, Virginia and Gloucester is very much a property rights state. We feel like people ought to be able to do what they want to do with their property until it bothers us.
Hey, Carol, just quickly.
But the same people who own the property that the solar farm was built own 300 acres up here in Glens.
Not close enough. I can tell you, I know enough about this, and I'm going to disagree with the 1 mile. No offense, but based on what I've been told by the people, you got to be a whole lot closer than a mile. It's too expensive. Maybe if they got really, really cheap land for those transmission lines, but where that property is, I don't think it's any usable data center.
One more thing.
Oh, okay, I'll come back to you.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Gibson, thanks for being here. Thanks for representing Glenn's. I appreciate that. Thanks for your time today. I would agree the solar farm in Glenn's is nothing short of a travesty. I have Carver's Creek, comes through my backyard, and it is a sooty hot mess now. So, for the the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, this meeting is absolutely necessary to understand the potential environmental impacts. And, I'll openly say I'm a conservative here. So even myself, I do understand that and recognize those, that is a unilateral issue on both sides that we have to consider. Thank you for clarifying that, yes, the West Point Potomac aquifer is probably one of the most depleted areas for the aquifer. And we're talking about maybe putting a data center 20 miles down the road that would even use any more water. I think that's a humongous impact to that. But my final point that I would say would be for any Board of Supervisors in here and the Planning Commission, if this does move forward, in some kind of impactful way. The most efficient process to go about this to avoid some of the issues with these solar farms and stuff like that is to put this to a referendum in the, so, thank you.
Well, thank you. And I'm just gonna say one quick comment on that, because I forgot to say in my notes. That is another, again, example of how you can't totally control things. The damage that was done due to rain, due to runoff was cited. They were given a notice of violation, but damage still got done both to VDOT and private property. Stopping work is expensive for businesses, but you know, it might have seemed like this to a lot of people. So I wish that hadn't happened. And I just want to be honest. It did, and nobody likes
Hey, Carol, just,
it.
I want to let the citizens know that with those solar farms, we were caught with our pants down. I mean, people were getting letters asking to sell their property. The board responded by having a number of forms, and we met a number of times, and we made a major ordinance change that restricted solar farms only a particular number of districts and less than 2% of the land area in each district. Right now, we'll probably have no more solar farms in Gloucester.
We fixed it,
We
but
fixed it's-
I can tell you, Ann and I met, we had people who were scouting us for solar farms from Charlottesville, all kinds of areas. They knew we were prime area for them.
And we had people say to us, I want to use my land and sell it. It was the
Yeah,
property
they
rights.
already had sold or
Yeah.
had contracts on property before it ever got to the board.
Carol, getting back to the questions tonight, I've been told there's some people in the other room.
Yes, I'm not recognized, I'm sorry. Okay, it might be, I'm gonna come back to it here, but in the, I can't see the hands. Mr. Hudson, can you help direct who has a question in your room?
I got a question. Can we meet in a room that's large enough to get everyone in next time? You said there's actually adequate for this?
I totally agree, and we talked about moving it and, you know, to maybe to Petsworth, and I'm not sure the cafeteria would have held all of us, but we did not expect quite this turnout. So this is literally the largest number of people we've had in
Well,
public meeting.
you do have Gloucester High School and you have an auditorium, you have access to a room that's large
Yes.
enough. I'd like to suggest Gloucester High School if you have nothing else. Because I'd rather not stand in the rain or break up into 10 different rooms, and let's see if we can't get together in a room big enough to actually have a meeting.
Well, I
That's all I gotta
appreciate
say.
that. Apologize and for not having a large enough facility. We felt it was important because we planned on the next one being in the courthouse area, and that can be moved to a school. But we really wanted to come to the neighborhood that would be impacted. So that's why I was here. A lot of people didn't understand that, you know.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we saw that when the planning commission had the meetings before, and I can't remember what the topic was, but
We rezoned this
the
area.
rezoning, we had the.
Can I
meeting
follow up and just by
Plus-
say the old saying, divide and conquer? Divide and conquer. It's better to keep the people together. That way everybody gets a say and you get the right thing done, no matter what that is. I'm not making a judgment here. I'm just saying we need to get together because it's easy to divide and conquer, and a lot of people try to do that.
Carol,
So, try to avoid that.
the board brought this up as an issue of where to have it, and you specifically said have it here for the exact same reasons you're saying right now.
Right, we wanted to bring it to the neighbors that was gonna be impacted first, but I understand your opinion and I really wish we'd had enough room. Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'll come back to the bottom classroom next.
All right, my name is Bill McDonald. I come here as a resident, a landowner, a small business owner, a local advocate, and an industry professional, meaning in this particular industry. So, just give you a background, I'm a high-level consultant for commercial construction industry, worked about $1.6 billion worth of projects over the last 2 years, to include some of the largest data centers on the East Coast, to include the largest data center, which is currently in construction down in Atlanta. So a couple of things that weren't mentioned that we need to be concerned with as people that live here is that in the process of requiring this large amount of energy, it can affect the upgrades for schools, hospitals, and farms. So in an attempt to try to provide enough energy for these, we have to consider that. They consider they're gonna upgrade them, but it will affect possibly the ability for energy to be distributed for everyone else. This is a natural, like we do a lot of hunting here. A lot of people are out in the woods and things. And so we also have to understand how it will affect the natural ecosystem.
Yes.
Right? Fences that block off how animals traverse across different land and how they raise their young and things like that. Those are definitely things that will also affect some of the things here. We already addressed the water thing. I totally understand that. The noise and the light, once the facility is established, yeah, it's minimal, but during the construction phase, as you mentioned, it could be 3 to 8 years. The traffic is ridiculous. I'm talking about massive trucks all day long, in and out. That means down Glenn's Road, it's gonna be nonstop for 5 years. Massive giant trucks that are coming in and out, delivering concrete and sand and all that stuff. So afterwards, yeah, it's nominal. But for those first construction years, it is a lot of traffic. The noise during the construction phase, yes, when a data center's up and it's established, the noise isn't all that much. But during the construction phase, again, we gotta consider that starting at 6 o'clock in the morning. If it's not too far away, it is gonna affect you. So that's the traffic disruption. I know we got a lot of woods as far as how it's gonna affect sightliness. I totally understand. But if you're not selling your land to the developers afterwards, what does it do to property values? It typically does not raise the property value after it's up. It actually will kind of decrease it a lot of times. And so that's something also that we want to consider. As far as the pollution goes, we talk about generators and diesel, but there's also nitric oxide, which is also a byproduct of these things, which can also get into the ground and into the surrounding area. Carbon dioxide as well, particulate matter. There's other things that are not standard that a normal person wouldn't consider. And sometimes even companies don't even actually share with you. Possible chemical spills, fire hazards, soil and water contamination from coolants or suppression agents, which are also used in the whole process of having these things run. The initial employment is great during the construction phase. I mean, it could be thousands of people, but then after that, as you mentioned, 40 or 50 people for the duration of that existence. So that's a temporary influx of employment. And then sometimes there's fire risks, and sometimes the economic benefit as it's presented by the actual company and corporation does not turn out to be quite like it is. And I know that there's a push politically here in the state to have these, totally understand that, but sometimes that paints the way the decisions are made and the involvement of the community. So that's all I'm telling you, having been in the industry, but also living here. Those are just some things that I wanted everyone to understand. Definitely we need an EAI, which is an environmental impact assessment. And there's some case studies around the country of people that have communities that have had some issues with data centers as well. And I know you mentioned some up there, but I just wanted to, as someone that's in the industry, but also lives here locally and as a business owner, I wanted to share all that information.
That's a very good list. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do want to just throw, it's not a counter because I totally understand what you're saying, but I do want you to remember they're going to get built. And even if it happens in King and Queen, it's going to affect us. So I'm not saying that means bring it on, but until we all decide to give away every bit of technology that we are so hooked on, these things are a reality. So it might not be here and we might be able to save Gloucester if that's what the community wants and our elected officials decide on. But it's a reality.
Carol, I just add to that, because what you said is a really good point. It ends up in a region and just something to think about. I'm not saying it's something you want to consider, but in far southwest Virginia, there's 4 counties in the city of Norton that have entered Regional Industrial Facilities Authority. So they're kind of a joint powers association. And what they've said is for all types of economic development, no matter where it locates, we share the revenue. And the benefits of that is sometimes you can find a better site that amongst a number of localities. So just a thought.
And that, thank you, that's a great point. We have talked at the Middle Peninsula level about whether they, what we call a rip-up. We have one, we're a part of the Hampton Roads one, but whether we needed one up here. And like Middlesex, probably there, you know, Matthews, no way, it's not gonna happen. Middlesex is the worst condition for their power lines than we are. So they were all like, yeah, let's get together. If there was a desire to do something like that, I think that's again a direction we would want from our board to have us start working towards that. It might seem we were quickly riding on the coattails of King and Queen and King William and trying to get in some of that revenue, because what sweat would we have? What we would have, the thing we talked about is we'd have to buy the land. Because what would Gloucester have to put in to be able to get anything back? It would be like purchasing the land, like having an industrial park and trying to market it for that purpose. And then if and when it ever delivers, we'd get our money back in more. Yes, Mr. Mallon. And I promise I'm going to the other classroom, I forgot.
Okay, a 40-watt megawatt center requires a landmass equal to 7 football fields or more, and needs an energy or utility source equal to that needed to accommodate 36,000 homes. With the bridge holes coming off this year, that amounts to, if you look at it in the opposite way, with no data center, a possible increase over a few years of a population going up to 93,600, including what we already have here with no infrastructure.
So the point is, if anybody here that we are ripe for the picking for homes. And so how do we handle economic development with all the potential of homes? Okay, the classroom that hadn't had anybody yet, so it's on our screen, it's the bottom Brady Bunch, but I don't know if y'all are on the top. Somebody in that classroom have a question.
Which one?
The not yours, Chris, the other one.
157. We're here first.
Well, we.
And he's already there.
Firstly, I just want to thank you for giving us this thorough overview on data centers. Sort of circling back to the pros and cons that we went over. To summarize everything I saw, it seems like there is not a huge working force of laborers here. And so, you know, there might be a little bit of money that will come in taxes as far as pros, and then a few jobs. However, to balance that out with the cons, I'm seeing a tremendous environmental impact, a tremendous amount of energy being used. I'm seeing things that we can't even imagine, aesthetics being damaged, and then ultimately
and the
any
waste
money
is
that we
going
make
to the water.
taken away again as it impacts our health, and plus the retail value of our homes for anyone who wants to sell. So
Where are these surveys?
to imagine how we're seriously considering implementing these monstrosities in this community.
Yeah.
And I, for one, will fight tooth and nail to oppose it at all costs.
So, again, summarizing, it's a little difficult to hear you at times because of the background noise, but mentioning of the pros and cons and feeling like there's not enough support for one with all the negatives and kind of encouraging fight like heck. Don't forget about the survey. Now,
Where is it? Do we have a survey here?
yes, there's a survey in here that people can take, and we can get you written copies if you can't do it on your smartphone, but we have a QR code, and it's just like 4 or 5 simple questions to start gathering input. You can imagine anytime you would hold a meeting about something that's economic development, I would say statistically, you're always going to have the sway against it. So in other words, the majority of people who leave their home on a rainy night are the ones who don't want something versus, you know, who want something. I think our survey, I'm going to predict, forecasting, crystal ball, it's going to be very negative.
Yes.
That's one of the things that our elected officials and the planning commission is gonna have to determine. Is that representative of the whole thing and we kill it and it's done? Or anything else that needs to still be done on this matter? So I always say to the elected
Really?
officials, and in this case, the planning commission, I really respect how hard their job is. Because we gotta have a budget and nobody wants anything in their yard. I don't know, other than, again, some of the other areas that maybe have more acres than. Yes, Ron?
Got one more question.
So it's a fairly large,
Okay, if we can kind of try to keep the noise down, if you don't mind, in the back classrooms.
there's a fairly large substation going in at Shackelford. Do we know what that's for?
No, I do know, I think that is just pure Dominion. I think that's just Dominion's growth. I will find out, but, they have been doing additional improvements. I don't believe there's any new business that's going in there. I think it's part of, they have another property. In fact, when I did my own scouting, I thought Dominion should own the thing. Because literally they have property right on 33, going towards West Point. And I thought, why don't they do it? But I guess they don't have enough for its wetlands.
The second question, has anybody approached the county yet about putting a data center in?
Not that I'm aware of, no, but they have in the other places, definitely. Okay, I'm gonna come back to you, if you don't mind, because we had gas, so. All right, do I need to go back to Chris, to your classroom?
Oh, it was over here. Go ahead.
Is that us?
Yes.
Willie Wright from downtown Martha. First, Carol, thank you with the gas.
You may want to come up.
Willie Ray from downtown Harcum, and just Carol, thank you and the guests for the presentation. It was great.
Oh, thank you.
You brought up a number of times about the neighbors. And so my concern is groundwater. So what is King and Queen looking at for a water source? It was nice to hear at Gloucester not looking at a water withdrawal. What's King?
I don't think, I think King and Queen would prefer to have the waterless type. They were part of the tour. I don't know if they have made that commitment, but knowing how people are about, what's had the aquifer, I would imagine that they would have the same requirement. But I don't know that for sure. We had hoped that their county administrator could come tonight and be one of the other speakers. She's not only a county administrator, she's their county attorney, but unfortunately the planning district commission meeting is tonight, so she's there.
And Carol, also, for any groundwater, it'll be through DEQ, so even
Right.
for a data center, they'd have to go
Yeah.
through the state.
And so that's what it said. The reference was that anybody who wants groundwater, they gotta go through DEQ. Again, it's a state decision. There's so much problems with groundwater. And you may have seen where Caroline and Spotsylvania and all these things are fighting. So I think it's gonna be tough to get groundwater for a data
Yeah,
center.
that's the point I wanted to bring up, because they're gonna be going after, not after, but they haven't really tallied up the agricultural community yet. And we're already in a special management area. And just so you know, I'm just concerned because the state just funded a 2-year study looking at groundwater withdrawal, looking at interbasin transfers, all those things. And I'm wondering if some of this can just almost wait.
So it's a 5-year, every 5 years, we have to update our state water plan, and we are part of the York River Group. And so the rest of the Middle Peninsula works together. We work with New Kent, James City County, York County and all, and we are in that process. And we also, I know I went down and I didn't taste the water, but I did go to, what's the plant called?
Swift.
The Swift plant, where they're taking used water and putting it back in the aquifer. It's an amazing process, and it's because the aquifer being depleted is not just about not having enough drinking water, it's about land settling and collapsing. So the pressure of that aquifer is really a mess. So I don't think anybody's gonna get anything on groundwater.
I just want to throw out some recent dollars have been put forward for a 2-year study. Probably no one knows about it. So it's a comprehensive coastal plan.
Well, and it was hard to hear the last part, but if that's a study that you have a copy of that you want us to see, please let us know.
Doing it. One more question.
Yes.
Okay, my concern is for all the farm animals in this area.
Mhm.
I know that other people have brought up, the ecosystem and stuff like that. But I live on a farm and we have several different animals. And I'm very concerned what this is going to do to them. And
Right. Well, we know that like dogs and other animals can hear so much better than we can. So I'm sure there's more studies that are being, done on that, but I can understand the concern about,
She just kind of like said.
I only care about one.
Animals, stuff like that, but there's more. To it.
I didn't hear
Land.
Complain about we're not the other.
I think there's-
Okay, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you on that last part.
I said, I think there's more than just the noise from this plant that may affect the animals.
Well, it's true, but I know one of the articles I read recently that's, in fact, it was in one of today's papers was talking about, it was an op-ed, but it was a mental health professional who was talking about people don't understand what that low level noise does to people. So I can just imagine animals might be more impacted. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
You have that article.
So what?
Just reading about the one in Warrington.
Okay, hold on, I'm gonna come back to the back classrooms, just a second.
When to have this data center, will it go to a referendum? Will everybody could vote, or will the county do it?
Well, I think it's too soon to know that. One thing that I think, just off the top of my head, the numbers of voters here versus the rest of the county, if y'all are really against it, you may not want it going to referendum. Because again, somebody who lives down in the point, who doesn't have to worry about it, doesn't even come up here. All of a sudden, the taxes are
They
gonna
don't
be
care.
lower.
Yes.
So you may not want to, think about that, whether that's the way to go. All right, I want to go back to one of the classrooms. Sir, are you? No, I think he's. Okay, all went up.
Did Middlesex join your tour? And if so,
Yes.
who?
Matt Walker.
Okay, thank you.
And, Economic Development Director, former county administrator. Trent, okay, he was here too.
Carol,
Okay,
you were speaking to somebody over here earlier. Did they have
yes,
a
I
follow-up
think
question?
now go back to vote. So yes, ma'am, you had a second question, I think. You're here? Okay.
Did the other lady?
No, you go ahead, because you haven't asked a question yet.
Okay, I've always heard the golden rule of economic development is job numbers and then corporate taxes. Okay, the way you have described it, or I guess in general, it's been described that there are 24 cars going in and out for 2 shifts. So that's 48 cars basically of workers. So where is the intellectual impact gonna come to this community? Because we're not really sharing in the benefits of this. We are in maybe the corporate, what you can supply the county of services. However, I look at the average price now of Loudoun County with a big concentration of these data centers. Because there's so much quote unquote money up there, the average price of any home is $1.5 million. Okay, so people get choked up on 300,000 a year. So that means if you have something like that coming in, my God, we're all wiped out. And the other thing is, I appreciate what you're doing. I mean, you're doing a fantastic job, and you're caught between a rock and a hard place. Your other option is there's a voracious appetite for residential housing. And I'm not gonna name a name, but I'm telling you, it's like a cancer on an area. We all moved here because we like it. It's a rural area. It's beautiful. When they come in, they take over. And if anything is for sale, they grab it up. If you don't believe me, take a quick drive down to Pocosin. Okay, so then go on down to the neighborhood, the established neighborhoods. And they bought some land, and then all these people with these beautiful homes are now gonna have lower end coming in there. It's just, it's almost like raping the landscape. So, yeah, that's your other option, but we've got to come up with something better. Everybody's looking for chips. Could we possibly be a chip manufacturing area here?
So I want to go back to the first question about, this is only 20 to 40 jobs, maybe 50. I think you're going to see that happening more and more. Anybody who works in business knows that about 80% of your outgoing is on personnel. That is changing with AI. That that is changing with technology. Now, we'll let them go out, and then I'm just gonna finish that about the housing, because I think this is really important related to the comp plan. So we know that we are, again, ripe for the picking. We already have several proposals that have been brought forward that our board is gonna need to vote on. If we don't find another solution, it's hard to rezone. And we gotta rezone and say, no, you can't build, just no. Then how do we survive? So rural areas have actually been looking to data centers as the answer. They give up one chunk. They don't have to have all these people coming in and out. They still can keep their zoning, but they have enough revenue to make up for the fact that their population. That's why rural areas are pushing for it, because they don't want the same sort of job situation. And I also think it's gonna be harder and harder to get this.
And some thought the dumps were like that, that's why we have.
Yeah, true. Yes.
So I, like my husband, have experience in data centers and technology. So I've spent 25 years before I moved here selling cloud computing. So my clients were either data centers or my clients' information was stored in data centers. But also as a small business owner, I feel like there has got to be another way for us to bring economic development type things to this county. I know that when we started Under the Stars Farm and Sherry, like.
Oh, that's
a
why I
bunch of
recognized you.
people, Yeah,
Okay,
we're
got it.
instrumental in just helping us be successful. You know, our farm has had some ups and downs, but we draw from Eastern Shore, from Maryland, from DC, from South Carolina. If you looked at our stats of how much tourism we draw into the county, who then goes to lunch on Main Street because we refer them to it, or does all of that, there's gotta be ways, and I understand that data centers are big business. I just don't think it's the right move for Gloucester. I think there's, and you mentioned it earlier, I think there are other ways that we could do
So,
this.
look back to this comment from this board member.
Yeah.
I also think we are not taking advantage of our natural resources and the tourism aspect. If we tunnel focused on this, well, we need to have a wide pan view. He talks about, you know, what they've got and the Skyline Drive and things. We have a presentation that is gonna be made to the joint meeting of the Economic Development Authority and the Board of Supervisors, June 17th, I believe it is. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Trish. I was like, July, June, whatever. So if you can't make it to that meeting, please watch it. I'm gonna be pushing for tourism growth. It's not a panacea. It's not gonna bring, you know, massive, and it's also very, can be very susceptible to the economy. But at the same time, it's mostly thought of as clean industry. It's green industry. Let them come here, spend their money and go home, right? So we're gonna be talking about whether that's an appropriate push, go in that direction. Okay, I'm gonna let you go because I have to hold you, then I'll be back to you, sir.
It's just a quick question. What is going in across from the solar farm down here? Down Glens Road? It's another.
It's the other part of the solar.
It's just part of the solar.
But there's
Taking
nothing,
up both sides of the road?
yeah, but they're not developing the other side.
Yes,
Yes,
they are.
Yes, they are.
They have.
They're in there.
Can we ask questions from this room?
They're on both sides of Glenn's Road, not both
No,
sides
both
of
sides of
17.
Glenn's Road, yeah, because they gave up the rights to develop on the other side of 17 by Lee's Neck.
Carol, there's a classroom on the bottom. has
Okay,
questions.
classroom. Yes.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Gloucester. I lived through the entire dump thing. My father spoke at every single meeting. I saw all the signs in the county. I watched all the uproar and I watched us not be heard. I also watched the solar farms show up out of nowhere on a by right. They've grandfathered out every single other solar farm in this area. Thank God, by the way, but still it's a travesty that they've gone in and cut down 1,000-year-old forests that were pristine, that house animals that are sacred to this area, that define the soul of our county. This is the oldest county in America. And the solar
Not quite,
farm,
but we are very
every
old.
day, the solar farm is invading and destroying my parents' property that they have made into almost a nature conservancy with the 7-acre pond that drains into the Dragon Run. every day for 1.5 to 2 years. That water is tainted brown from clear water. There's runoff excessively. There's hydraulic fluid slicks and oil and trash. And Gloucester County has turned their back on us. They have not responded to us in over a year. We were told that that other side of the solar farm was not gonna be developed until they clean their mess up. Well, the mess is not cleaned up. So what happens when a data center comes in? You nonchalantly blow us off again with even more environmental problems? Our county has value well beyond cutting down all the trees and taking away the homes of all the animals.
Now, I understand your concerns and I'm very sorry. We all are very sorry about the erosion and the pollution. I do want to make sure that you all know that we have been working with the state. We've reported them, the violations to the state. So it's not a cop-out, but
Carver's Creek's still not clean.
But let me just say, it's not a cop-out, but we are not ignoring citizens. We are working very hard to do what we can do. And here, unfortunately, we're not the only one that's in the situation. If you talk to King and Queen, you talk to Essex.
Yeah.
There are places, almost
It's terrible.
every solar farm is having the same problem in our
So
area.
why would we want something even more environmentally
it's-
detrimental?
It's a trust issue, I get that, and it's also potentially an environmental issue. So, continue to advocate for your, for your beliefs is what that would be my advice.
We just don't want to be the dumping ground of Gloucester County up here. We came here to be in a clean area of forests and trees and peace and quiet and nature. What happens when light pollution drowns out our stars?
I understand, and we do have zoning that prohibits the big housing up here. Yes.
I would just like to say that it's very interesting. These are things political. And it is really interesting with the history that I have in government regulation of environmental impacts to see how the not in my backyard people also vote conservatively. All of you here who are afraid of these developments, who voted for Youngkin, who voted for the felon in chief, who rapaciously support industry and the money-making efforts of millionaires over our general public interest. You have to look at data centers and housing developments here and the absence of the political will to protect the things that this lady here was just talking about. So it's political, folks.
Well, I don't want to get into too much of the politics, but everything is political, so I agree with you, everything is political. I think that my caution is that we understand, all of us, I love this community. Again, I've been here 38 years. I've got my children here, I've got my grandchildren here. I don't want this county hurting anyway. I have just total passion for it. So if we all agree on that, we need to come together on how we can be economically thriving. You cannot have your cake and eat it too very easily. And so while we may not agree with decisions that have been made at the state level, like the incentives that were gone for going data center crazy, that's we wanted, our government wanted to be the capital of data centers. That was a choice, and we've done it. And there were reasons logistically in the beginning. But anyway, if you don't want that for your community, we have to find a way to be able to fund our schools, to fund our fire and rescue, to be able to fund other things. So maybe it's a problem solving. We all look at it in a different way together.
Hi, I just wanted to say that I actually run a tourism-based small business, and I receive more calls and emails for customers than I could ever possibly take care of with just my business. I usually have to refer them out to other businesses, and there aren't very many of us in the area, so that really might be a good avenue to explore. I was worried about the economy affecting us this year, but it really hasn't.
Yeah, I'd love to talk with you later
Tell her
to
to
have
come to
some
the joint
personal
meeting.
stories
Tell
for
her to
that
come to the
joint
joint
meeting. And
meeting.
yes, I would love for you to be there. Yeah, I'm pushing. I mean, I was director of Parks, Rec and Tourism before. I get a lot of bad comments made about all I care about are Parks and Rec, but I don't think they're bad words. I think they're good words, and I think that they're, we don't spend enough on it. But anyway, tourism, I think is a big help. Yes, sir.
Why don't we just stop doing the economic growth and just improve Gloucester for tourists to come and put up some things that they can enjoy? We don't need to get overdeveloped in this county at all.
And it's still a sweet spot. So imagine, like, I think we probably all love Main Street, right? And when you have family come in or friends come in, you want to take them to Main Street. It's so quaint. Maybe you want to eat one of the restaurants and all stuff. It's the same kind of places we like to go and visit and explore. But if you lived on Main Street, or if you live maybe, I don't know, down Orange Springs Road or whatever, and all of a sudden we triple the traffic on Main Street, there's a negative to everything, and we're going to face that. So that's somehow we have to find peace, and there's no way we're ever going to have economic development.
Humongous firehouse
Everybody agrees.
downtown. We
Everybody
don't
agrees.
need it.
So we have to, do it in in a very cautious way. Yes.
I'm probably in the minority here, but I live next to a 20 megawatt solar farm and it's fantastic. Makes no noise, there's no pollution, they have 21 detention ponds, and I live near Haynes Pond. There's not an ounce of sediment going in there. It just sits there and cranks.
Only 20 acres, the ones here is
Let's
2,000.
be careful with the language. We don't have to keep things out. Think about the land near Page Middle School. It's very flat. It does go off towards Haynes Mill Pond, and think about the area up here. It's a totally different terrain. And so when you've got all these slopes, if it's not growing grass, it's moving mud.
Yep.
They're not doing environmental studies, just building by right.
But at the same time, I have rights on my property, but not to be abused by your rights. Somewhere down the line, we have to find a negotiation and that's why we created, I guess, that economic factory area down there by and stuff like that. You decided that was a place, you know that's a place, and how come you're not looking at that? And I know you
It's built out basically other than one lot. So we have the Page Middle School site for potential economic development without natural gas, without all those things. We have no one coming to us. We had, Sherry's been marketing that site for years.
Near the firehouse at Page Middle
The
School.
school still owned it. No one's coming.
Economic development here.
People say, why don't we build a thing like, what's the one up in Whitestone? The recreation area?
Compass.
The compass. People say, why don't we build a compass? Understand that compass had a $12 million donation by the husband and wife who did that. It would never have happened without a philanthropist. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'd really like to urge the commissioners and everyone who's involved in this with the government to avoid signing any non-disclosure agreements with any aspects of the data industry to find out about the technologies. Because when we come to these meetings, we expect you to be absolutely frank to us and not have to withhold any information about the potential environmental impacts on the farm. So other communities in other states have been caught up in the non-disclosure agreement, and it's really worked to the negative effect on governance. So I urge all of you involved in governance to include the Middle Peninsula Planning District to avoid getting involved in any non-disclosure agreements with Amazon, with Microsoft, or anyone else, so that you can come to these meetings and continues to give us the excellent information that you're doing tonight.
Well, and I think that's a very good point, because a lot of businesses, first thing they say is, this is off the record, and they make you say, so it's a hard thing, but I think that's something we definitely need to consider is if we are approached. Good thing is we're not landowners, so they're not gonna come to us, they may come to you.
But they will come to the Planning District Commission.
Yes, they would have to. And they would probably come and meet with Ann first to discuss, what can we do? How do we get this through? Which right now, not happening. It's not in our comp plan, it's not a facility that matches. And you've had You've been very quiet. You're very knowledgeable. Would you like to speak up?
Right now, it's only permitted as, conditional use permit in our I-1 district, we have very little I-1 industrial area in the county. So this would involve a change in our comp plan, our comp plan talks about this being rural, we do have the Dragon Run overlay in our comp plan, so where, you know, as Chip mentioned, where it went, if we decided to move forward, would be outside of there, I would hope, but, you know, I think, you know, that's why the planning commission really wanted to have this meeting to hear from the public. We did, we did our solar ordinance 4 times. So, you know, we did listen to the public, but there were public hearings. We passed the ordinance. Nobody was at that public hearing when we adopted the ordinance to allow solar by right.
I think we learned. If you want a response to that, like a good response, I think you know, especially how many people showed up here. I think we've learned our lesson as a community. So we don't, I know, I myself don't blame you for that by any means. You know, if we don't show up to the meetings, we can't learn. But that is the reason why I showed up here tonight. Sure.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you, more than myself, that's probably a lot of
And
reasons.
we really
why.
we want to hear from the public, and
Absolutely.
our board wants to hear from the public, our planning commission, they say it at every meeting, you know, we'd love to hear from you, and our meetings are televised, so even if you can't come, there's opportunities to comment. So I really, as Carol said, I'm really happy, I'm sorry that we had 3 rooms, I'm happy.
Yeah, and anybody who's left, you wanna come down here, we got plenty of room now.
And I want to give Chip credit for reserving this, for reserving the extra room, for setting this all up.
Yeah.
We had talked about having it a page, and.
I'm glad you had it here.
But the
Thank
planning
you for
commission
having
wanted
it
to
this
have
year.
it locally, so, but again, I give Chip a lot of credit for at least having those extra rooms. I really didn't think we filled this room up, so thank you all for coming.
2 comments. One is that Carol's mentioned 2 joint meetings. They're both at TC Walker. There's one with the EDA and there's one with the Planning Commission. They're at a larger facility than this. They're at TC Walker. They are advertised. So they will be in the paper and stuff when we have those meetings. And the second thing is through the development side, you're talking about, you know, your rights versus somebody else's rights. The zoning was set up and we didn't have zoning before the 80s.
84 we got it.
So everything before that was by right. Whatever you want to do with your land, you could. After 84, they decided we had to start putting some controls so you could have some of this compromise between neighbors, or one didn't build a horse farm and the guy next door was trying to do something different, so that they worked on that. We just went through multiple years of having the planning commission and the board get together and talk about all the different things you could do. And I feel we really improved our zoning because it allowed a lot more of these home businesses that we saw through COVID. People want to do things at home and we had to have them come in and do special permits. Now they're by right. But again, we went through that and it was all advertised and spent several years. I think we made the joke that it was 4 years of these joint meetings trying to get all the things we wanted to include in it so that you could do what you want on your land, but the people next door could do what they wanted to.
And we deal with these problems. We got another email today with lots of pictures of what the neighbor's doing. Where I have respect for what the board has to deal with, I have respect for what we have to deal with one neighbor mad at another neighbor, and it happens literally every day.
So are these meetings advertised on the county website?
Yes, they
for those
are.
Of us that don't get the newspaper?
Yes, and if you notice this one, we've never advertised as much as we have in this one. Quentin Shepherd, our public information officer, put it front and center. Every single person who went to our website had that pop up for over a month. You couldn't come to our website without reading about this meeting.
Right.
So, and in addition to all the social media that we did, so.
And we get the beehive. Yeah, Carol.
Right, yes, yes.
Tell them about the beehive. Everyone gets the beehive,
But
right?
everyone doesn't get the Beehive now.
It's online now.
It's online.
Oh, now,
Facebook.
how about having like broadband up this way? Because I don't know how people get it, but I've got to pay Vetco an outrageous sum. I got to use a MiFi box, half the size of this. The battery is blown up on
So
me 3
I
times.
started the broadband project. I'm not with it anymore, but anybody wants to talk to me afterwards,
Yeah,
because that's a
I'm
whole other topic. I'm more than happy to stay and talk about the latest things that are happening with broadband.
That's what it looks like now.
Since you're working with Middlesex, will you encourage them to put articles in the newspaper about your meetings as well?
Well, sometimes they pick up on our news, but I'm not sure, and sometimes we send it out. I'll have to ask whether it was sent to them, but I do know the people from Middlesex were provided emails to come tonight, so I know it got there.
It was on
But-
Facebook.
Yeah, it was- Facebook does everything, right?
And middle.
Of course, you know how many megawatts we used on this? I'm just kidding.
I agree with her point. It should be advertised in Middlesex through the Sentinel. Only because Middlesex sits right next to Gloucester. And this will affect us if we live in Middlesex. The only reason we found out about this was because the Dragon Run people sent a note out.
Right.
Because I
So-
notified them.
No, that's,
You gotta-
so nothing's gonna happen without, well, I don't know about Middlesex, but definitely King and Queen. King and Queen, right? They own the fiber. There's no fiber here to support this, right? So the fiber, the data going out of Gloucester will go through King and Queen. And they will have to be involved.
They will be involved.
We have no fiber support. So,
There's fiber, but it's privately owned.
right.
So, those who own it would sell it in a second if it was productive enough. I mean, you've got internet here, you've got fiber. I know we're really running late on time. It's 8:30. I'm happy to stay and talk to anyone, and obviously people can get up and leave. I just want to make sure that if we call it quits, that anybody knows they can stay, and I want Joe to be able to get home. Is there anything else?
You have
collectively?
water, so I want to stay.
I know, that's true. I know. That's how I got my son to come home.
So, I had spoke publicly about the effects of the solar farms. I know the county responded. I work for another state agency and we're dealing with the same issue. Is there room in that other main room?
Oh,
All
absolutely.
right, so we're just gonna have you guys leave the other classrooms because we're still hearing you. So
Yeah.
either come on in here or however. So you're at.
So I deal with another state agency. I was one of the original ones to report on the deficiencies at the Carver State site. And I know the county just met with this. And I
Right, we
appreciate
have
it.
been. Thank you for that. Yes, we have been. We're very concerned about it. And we are very concerned about the landfill too, and there's issues there. We are
So
probably on it.
I look at it this way. We're kind of blocked in now between the Walnut Shade Solar Farm. We have the Carver Creek Solar Farm. They put in the transformers, they put in the substation.
So it's just,
How much of this writing is on the wall because
that substation cannot be used with the data center. It is not built for that capacity and it's not in the right location.
so
Doesn't mean that they wouldn't connect to it as maybe a possible backup kind of thing, but it doesn't have the power and the ability to do
because
a.
I find it deeply troubling that we allowed a solar farm into this county that is being funded by Amazon. And now we're talking about data centers.
I didn't know
That
that
is a
solar is being funded by Amazon.
That is a power partnership agreement with Dominion, with Amazon, right there in Carver's Creek. So it kind of feels like the writing's on the wall here, the same way it felt like it was with the landfill, and we thought that
Well,
20 years ago. And yes, I know I was a little kid then, but I was running around getting signatures too.
yeah.
And
All I can tell you is, to my knowledge, there is no way that technologically could connect other than some sort of a back. We talked about that.
Yeah.
And in fact, the first thing that I talked about was the Page property. Because if you go down 17, you see a big power line, right? It goes just past Page, just cuts through going towards the water. And I was like, man, we got the solar, we got our property, we could do it there. It's already kind of out there, and that power line, they would have to completely redo the whole thing, and it would have to go for miles and miles and miles and miles being redone.
And if I can, our infrastructure is struggling to handle the clearing that is taking place right now because of those two sites. So if you start clearing more in between those, we're gonna have additional problems. We're gonna be closing 198 here shortly because that pipe is failing.
Yeah, I know, we
We
reported
have,
that to
we
VDOT.
have other areas off
And
of
you may
that.
work for VDOT, I know, because we reported.
I'm not gonna say which state agency.
No, I
I'm working with.
wouldn't either, I understand.
But we've sustained damage all around these sites, and
Yes.
now we're talking about clearing more land. This is gonna start having detrimental
Well,
effects. for
I
people
understand
getting to
too, and this is not an excuse or a rebuttal, but it would be years before any land would be clear. So those solar panels might be needing to be replaced by the time they would happen.
And it'll be years before we can replace infrastructure because we have no money.
Yeah, and it's true, it does take years to recover.
We can do it here. You have to watch how you say that, because it almost sounds like you promote this.
That I'm promoting it?
Yes,
No.
every once in a while I've heard, we can do it here, and then we talk about the.
Oh, I was excited. Yeah, in the very beginning, yeah.
Difficulties with the county and how this would be like a, again, I hate to go back to Trump, but it is, it's like, oh, this will break us even and we'll make.
So two things. I don't vote. I have no authority in that. And I try to stay as neutral as I can be, but at the same time, I have to look at economic development for the county. So I was excited to explore this option. Because I knew a bunch of other places were making a lot of money. My personal opinion doesn't matter. I'm really about educating. That's all I care about is the educating.
I want to know more about the storm runoff as far as the solar fields. There was a gentleman in here saying that the silt's not going anywhere. I've got proof right
No,
here.
I don't think anybody says the silt's not going there. We know it's, we've reported
It has
to,
destroyed the
Yeah.
Zion branch.
yeah, we've
Don't
reported
talk
to
about the
DEQ.
dragon. The Zion branch dumps into the dragon, which dumps into the Yankee tank. So not only are you ruining one body of water, you're ruining three.
It's the solar facility, it's under construction, and we've given them multiple notices of violation. VDOT's come down and done the same thing.
Shut them
We're
down.
working with these people, we've actually stopped them from working a couple times. But every time it rains, because they don't have all their environmental stuff in place,
Okay.
we see the silt run down.
Cut the trees down there.
So
and
don't
put
say
in
you,
solar.
if you don't mind, because this is not us.
Or
No,
whoever-
the county didn't do
It's a
anything.
solar facility.
It's in the county, it's.
Right, but it's a private
Oh.
industry and private industry often doesn't look out
Well,
after.
you cut down the trees, so nothing's drinking the water.
Right,
Okay, now you're trying to put in a 20-50 acre facility here of nothing but concrete buildings and parking lots. Where is 20 to 50 acres of water gonna go?
well, as you,
Every ditch here goes to water somewhere. There's rivers all around us.
well, and I did mention that
But
that is
God
one of the
forbid, if one of
impervious.
us cuts a cattail down, you're all up on our budget about it. But when y'all do
Let's
something,
let's be nice to the you.
when
Don't need to go there.
When the
We're
county and the
hardworking
government
civil
does
servants.
something, here we are years later and still, like that lady was just saying earlier, she's not getting any response from.
No, that's
She
not
is.
true. That's,
She
I'm
is.
sorry, I corrected, it's absolutely
Yeah.
not true. And I will defend what we do because I know what we do. So, it's really easy to take pot shots, not saying you're doing it, but for anybody.
No,
Sir,
I've
we've
seen it.
agreed with you. We're the ones who are
I
reporting
know,
them.
but I want
So-
people to see what this
Well-
stuff is doing.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, we're very upset about it. Our
I
staff
bought
is
that piece of property to have a nice pristine pond and stream running through. And now I've got nothing but muddy water and I can't even fish it.
It is, you could do a civil suit and sue them. Maybe you need to consider that.
I think why this is being brought up is the fact that if they start it, this could happen. So
Oh, it
that's
will
why
happen.
we're trying to be a little proactive about
So,
it,
wait a
that
minute.
it could happen down the road.
And this would be the headwaters of the Propatec. It seemed like you're one.
There are regulations that they have to follow. We made them follow whatever those regulations are. We know that we are not the only locality that's had this problem. And I think and that is one of the reasons I think we're all happy that it's limited, that the citizens spoke out. But if there's any indication, or I hope there's no thought that we knew something bad was gonna happen and we didn't stop it. Because
No.
as a person who cares about the environment, if we knew that there was something else they needed to do, we would have said it. But these are people who build solar farms here, and, we're following the laws.
But if we as a group can prevent that from starting at all by not having one.
Right. Well,
then
and that's part of that, being an advocate, if you don't want a data center. You've got the information, you have got that opportunity to say that.
Real fast, I brought this up. I would say just for the rest, got one left up here, Board of Supervisors, if the Glens community, if you would consider having a separate meeting for the Glens community about what you have done for the solar farm, what the violations you have done, what you will continue to, what tools are left in the tool chest. I understand that, cat's out of the bag. There's only so many things that are left to do. You just mentioned one civil suit.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that takes a little bit of money, in most cases. However, if we could, as a group, maybe brainstorm, what options are left to somewhat hold the rest of this process accountable, if any, you know what I mean? And if that's the nature of the meeting, I know as a Glenn's resident, as a property owner that has a piece of Carver's Creek on it, you know, I would greatly appreciate it. So.
Well, I think we can definitely look at doing that. We have community engagement coordinators. We have one that's at Petsworth Elementary School. Part of their role is to involve the community. And this would be a perfect thing to have them come in and help us with that.
Certainly.
What we need to do though is not have we got to figure out problem and solutions. Because we really, I can't say it enough, we do care.
I know
And we could have stopped it.
Yeah, we could have stopped it, and I agree, and.
No, I mean, could have stopped it once the stuff was going on. I mean that as far as the erosion.
But me as a resident now, you know, I know as a single resident, I stand no chance against that big corporate name on that sign, on that solar farm. So if we don't come together as a Glenn's community, then.
Yeah, I don't
we'll
know.
just
There,
fish
you know, there
around
may be some class action suit and you get some lawyer who's willing to do some pro bono work. I don't know.
Channel
It's definitely
13
something.
news
Yeah,
just left out of here.
I find it hard to
In
believe that,
Richmond,
you know,
they had the
some
same-
environmental process within the state could intervene in some way.
Well, they have, like you said, we need to look at all the tools
I
in the
mean,
toolbox.
we did stop at massive housing thing for a salamander, right?
Right.
Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Salamander? Now, granted, I think that's been figured out and may go forward. But nonetheless, it definitely, you know, it definitely puts, you know, put a foot in somebody's face, you know.
Well, we can be cynical too. So we question whether that was 100%.
Certainly.
Right stuff, because it's property sold. So
I
if I'm
did
trying
see-
to sell something, oh, the salamander's an issue.
I did see on TV where they had an issue in Richmond with, I believe it was solar panels. And all these, I hate to say it if anybody's in here rich, not cutting you down, but all these people had land on this big, nice lake and they showed pictures before and after. And how it got muddy and how they complained to other people, nothing happened. And they even called the state. Well, until the TV people got involved, nothing happened. Once the TV people got involved, they stopped and they started saying that, yes, it's starting to clear up and they don't have as much issue as they had. And as I was interrupted, and I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Channel 13
Set
left
up
out of
each-
here, that may be the people you might want to catch up with also to say.
She's
hey,
still in the
look,
hallway. She's out there interviewing me. But I will tell you that DEQ, the people who monitor this stuff, they're aware of what's going on up there. We have private inspectors go up every single day. I've talked to engineers that we've had flow down from Canada because this company's out of Canada. We've talked to these people who were blue in the face about the things they need to be improving. And that's what we do. We just have to bird dog them all the time. There's nothing we can do right now other than keep giving them notice of violation. I mean, you can start fining them, but our county attorneys looked at that and that
Well,
takes.
let's just not allow them in the county anymore.
Well,
Well, we
they were by
basically
right. They kind of
are.
got us.
County up, we don't want you.
This
If
company's
you're not gonna
different than the
take
others.
Separate
Strata was the
responsibility
others.
for your
Well,
actions.
this one's out of Canada.
I don't think there'll be another solar
Yeah, there
site
won't be
unless
another- yeah,
unless the
not in
zoning
Boston.
changes.
Data center ain't gonna be no better.
Well, it depends. So the gentleman who talked about construction, I'm an engineer, so talked about construction. The problem with the solar facilities is you clear so much land at one time. When you're clearing 300 acres at a time, the runoff from this gets to be atrocious. When you're building a data center, you're not gonna do that. You're gonna clear 10 acres at a time. It'll be set up on a much better location. Mr. Gray, after we did our first, this one was by right after it, he complained about the topography up there. So we had to add to our solar ordinance that you couldn't have so much topography, because again, what does it do? Cause erosion. So erosion causes what? All that stuff to come into the rivers. All that was before we started to have an ordinance that makes sense. The one we have now limits the growth, limits the type of land they could be on, but that one was by right and they caught us. They got in before anybody knew what was going on, and we're still living with it. But we try every day to make them do what they're supposed to do, every day.
The other thing I would like to say is the same thing with the data center is they're billionaires. Billionaires come in, they say, oh, we're gonna abide by the laws.
Right.
They change their mind or decide they're not going to. And what does a little county like Gloucester, how can they fight billionaire data centers? I mean, there's nothing really left that we can do once they come in and decide they're not gonna abide by any of our environmental.
Citizens made a big difference in a very large solar farm that was to be built down in Guinea. and it was all in very environmentally sensitive land. And that's what drew the ire of the people who were around and brought in the Board of Supervisors to begin the process of changing the solar ordinance. And that was the group from Texas that knew nothing about Gloucester. And if it wasn't for some of the people that complained, and a bunch of us would always go down and look at this, and we rejected that. We said no. So that did happen. That was going to take over huge chunks of land down in Guinea, some of the most environmentally sensitive land that we have in Gloucester, besides what's on the Dragon, and it made a difference.
All right, let's let this gentleman who's been so patient.
Yeah, I agree that the Carver Creek Solar Farm has been a disaster up to this point. But what scares me is you can't approve the next phase of it, because the next phase of it brings it within 70 feet of the Dragon. And you got all that frontage again on Zion Branch. Yeah.
Let's make sure.
No?
It's, the next phase is approved, that's the phase north of 198. And so that's the amount of clearing that you're gonna see on that.
That's it.
That is phase 2.
Okay. And are we doing anything different to supervise that one? Can we?
We are,
Yes.
actually, they have a special memorandum of agreement. They're paying like $60,000 a month just for the third-party inspectors that they pay for. The county hired them and they're paying for them, and they had to hire additional inspectors to go out there. As Mr. Bain says, they go out there every day. So we have that, Ron brought up the other solar farms. We were very lucky with Strata Solar. We have 3 other solar farms, never had these problems.
Great.
And this one, again, it was by right, so there were no additional conditions, no additional buffers. Our ordinance had some buffers, but we are on them, but to just, the biggest thing, as George says, is you gotta get the seed down, you gotta make sure it's growing, and so.
And you gotta get it down before hurricane season this year.
But even this past couple of days, I mean,
Yeah, the rains.
But
But we have gotten the state involved, we got DEQ involved, VDOT's been involved because of the road issues.
Our board's been involved, they end up showing up on site, but I would tell you, phase 2, we made them do it in pieces, where phase 1, they started clearing such large areas. We don't let them build the ponds first. We don't let them clear where the panels were gonna go. We build the ponds first. Build your access roads, we know you can get to the ponds to fix them when they erode. Get your heights right on the pond so they retain the right amount of water. They didn't do that in the first section. Even their ponds weren't the right elevation. So we were getting flooding when we weren't supposed to get flooding. So the second phase, we went really into a lot more detail because they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. The other companies did. When you talk to them, what they said they did. When you talk to these guys, what they said they were gonna do, I even asked the guy who was the project engineer, what type of degree he had. He didn't even have an engineer degree. Well, like, you shouldn't be out here being the guy who's in charge of this. So we got our own inspectors to go watch them because we've got to, but it's not helping you because the first section's already been done and the erosion's still happening there. And we're still fighting with them all the time to get grass. You don't know the times I drive up there to see if we got any grass growing because they're poor at even knowing how to get grass to grow. But we're working with them so they know. I mean, they know all of our names. We're not sitting back in our ivory tower laughing while they tear up the northern part of the county. We're spending a lot of time up here trying to convince them they've got to get it back to the way it was. And I get calls.
This is really a scary phase.
Yes, and it was the biggest one we ever had. It's the biggest one by right, and we just kind of had to really fight to now get some control over it.
My problem is I live on protected wetlands.
Right.
Okay, with all this extra moisture, I've got 120-foot trees that are endangering the lives of my family. And I can't do anything with these trees because they're in protected wetlands.
You're saying because it's so much wetter, the trees are starting to die?
Yes, they're falling over. I have trees leaning all in my yard now.
I would assume there's an environmental exception on.
Yeah, you can.
Dangerous situations.
Yeah, you can contact the environmental.
I've heard y'all close down businesses in this county.
Well, don't trust that. You're hearing it right from our mouths. You call her, they'll get you.
I know a guy that lost his business here in this county because he cut a cattail down in his ditch out front on Route 17.
People will tell you things.
Yeah,
People will tell you things.
I know for a fact.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
There is a permit to cut in the RPA.
Yeah.
Safety issue. and it's easy to get.
But I gotta pay money to get this permit, correct?
Probably so.
So I've gotta waste my money because y'all ruined my
The
property.
permit, it's called a WQIA.
We did not ruin your property, sir.
It's just.
Gloucester County did not ruin your property.
It's a piece of paper, and the reason why is
Well, you
we're
didn't stop these people from ruining my property.
We sure did our best.
complaint driven, so again, people do complain about each other. You have the WQIA form, which is free, to say you're cutting down disease or dying trees. That's what you need, and then you have the piece of paper, or you can go and do it, and if nobody complains, just, that's the way.
Right behind you, there's a lot of people who cut down things and nobody ever knew about it. There's a whole lot more of that than anybody getting in trouble.
We have 2.5 inspectors.
Yeah, we don't have people to go out and watch who's cutting this or that, so, we get complaints that we're not responding fast enough to the neighbors who are complaining about the other neighbors. We're fighting as much as we can. Okay, anything else before, it's been a long evening.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys, and we're gonna be looking at that other meeting and seeing what we can do. I think some sort of neighborhood camaraderie kind of thing would be good for Glen.
And if you want to do the survey and you haven't yet, we've got QR codes and we have paper copies out in the hallway.